So, my name is Lukáš Nykrýn and I work in RedHat. I don't work on Docker and I don't use Docker. Actually, most of my work is on the level below that. I work mainly on the inits. It's the stuff which boots your computer, setups it, runs the service, and writes those greens OKs that everything is fine. So, what I like about Docker? Well, it's a standard, and I really like standards because what it means, you can create an image, you can create it on Ubuntu and then run it on Fedora, which is great. And because it's such widespread, you can use it. There are a lot of images which you can use. But I really don't like the Docker app because, from my perspective, as I said, I'm a low-level developer. There is a lot of things which are wrong. I will probably not bother you with those. If you want to know more, just buy me a beer or two after the presentation and I can talk about it for an hour or two. I don't think it will be interesting for most of the audience. So, what I would suggest to you instead of Docker, I would suggest to use systemd because, well, I'm working on systemd and I spend most of the time on the systemd. So, what is systemd? Well, systemd, I heard that someone was calling it like a user space kernel. Well, that's almost correct because it should provide unified user space APIs for most part of the system. So, again, so what actually systemd is doing? We have there systemd, which is in it. It was, as I had said, it will boot your system, prepare it, run the services which you want. For example, other interesting thing is the journald, which is our logging daemon. Then, for example, the network D, which is the new network manager. It doesn't do a lot of stuff now, but I think it has a great future. For us, currently, the interesting stuff is the machine D, which is like a supervisor around the containers or even virtual machines. And it provides, again, the standard API to start containers or start virtual machines if they register their container or their machine into the machine D, which is not the thing with Docker. Then another interesting thing is the nspawn, which is our own containerization on containers, well, technology with just containers. And probably the last thing which I would mention is the import D, which now takes the care about downloading the images. So, why you should use systemd? Well, you should use systemd because you will have already probably on your machine. Well, most of the biggest distribution use it now or will. For example, Debian will use it. I'm not sure if as default, but it will be available in Jessie, and Ubuntu will use it as a default in 15.04. In Fedora, we have it since, I don't know, 3 years ago. Our RHEL, Red Enterprise Linux, has it since the last release. It's also in SUSE Enterprise Linux. Well, that probably sounds great, but I must admit that there are a few downsides. Currently, the only file system which we support is Btrfs. Does anyone here use Btrfs or knows what Btrfs is? One. Okay, it's a quite innovative file system, or it's quite similar to ZFS. Well, ZFS does a lot of more things, but you can't use it on Linux. So yeah, we just require this one, and most of the stuff which I will be talking about is only in the last release of systemd, which is not in all of those distributions which I wrote there. And the last things, it's really work in progress now because the first lines of code for this were written during this Christmas by my colleague. And to be completely honest, when I prepared this presentation, I hit about 6 different bugs, which I will be solving through next month. So yeah, it's work in progress, but I think it's really nice. So let's go to the demo because nobody cares about theory and everybody wants to see how my demo blows in my face. So the first thing is that I want to show you that you can actually download the Docker image. Well, I didn't download it here because my machine is not connected to the internet, so I downloaded it before. But you can just type machine control pool Docker and specify the image like in Docker. What we have to specify here for V1 repository is that you don't care about verification because those images are not signed, and you have to explicitly specify that because we want to push signed images. In the future, we would like to see that even the base system of the host will be an image which will be signed, and then you could use, for example, a secure boot to really ensure that there was nothing modified on your system, and that's the stuff which we really want to push. So we have downloaded an image, so what will we do now? We will just, we can list what images we have downloaded on the system. There is almost nothing in the listing, there are just a few of my test images because this is quite a new system which I just prepared for my presentation. Yeah, probably nothing. So I can print information about one image. It just tells me where the image is located, when I have it created, and that the image is writable. You can have writable and non-writable image. If you start a non-writable image, it will create again a layer above it and store the changes there. So let's try that we can actually start the container. Again, you just type machine control start the image. And now we can see that I have two images running, and the first one is the Fedora, which we have started just now. Well, that's almost boring, but let's see what I really like about our machine control systemd instead of Docker. If you type machine control status Fedora, you can get a lot of more information that I would guess that Docker will provide you. You can see when the image was started in one screen, what is the containerization technology. Here's our nspawn, where the image is, what are the, we create a special network interfaces for every image. So you can see that for this one, it was the virtual interface Fedora. You can see the version of the system which was used for that image. And after that, you can see all the processes which are running inside the image. And what I really like is that you also see last 5 or 10 lines of log file from that machine in one screen. So I will shut this image now. That was an image which I downloaded from Docker. And I have prepared my own, which contains, oh, no. There was one more thing which I want to show. Currently, if you start an image using machine control, it will only run the init inside of it. You can't specify a specific command which you won't run in your image. So there is, you can do it if you can change the command if you directly use the nspawn. That you can specify that you want to run this container and run that command in it. As I mentioned, there are a couple of bugs. This one that failed to create the directory, it's because I'm not running the Linux, which I probably should. But as you see below that, the command was executed, and you can see content of my root in the image. What is the other interesting thing? If you don't want to run just a command, but you want to boot your container, you just specify the B option there, and now it will really run the systemd, start the machine, start every service which you have specified in your, and offer you a login prompt. I haven't set up an account there, so I can't log in, so I will just kill it. Yeah, so that was, that was the end of the Docker image, and I have prepared my own, which is running the newest systemd also inside the container, and there is also an Apache. So you can see here that the image is running. There are some HTTPD processes, and because this one also contains a neural network in it, it got a lot of more addresses. You can, on your local host, you can access it by those 10.0.0.2 addresses or the IPv6, and it's accessible by the outside world by the second one. Yeah, but again, there is nothing more interesting. So what I can also do here, this is another feature which I really like, is that you can access this one service from the container from the host. You just specify the system control as you would with the normal services on your computer, and just specify that you want to use that container and you are interested about that service. And again, you got the status of that service. You can see what the service is doing, and I don't know why there are any logs, but, well, never mind. So, what I have next? Yeah, I want to see that the container is running and there is the Apache. And I forgot the IP addresses which was specified there, but it doesn't mind because we are providing also an SS switch module which translates the names of the containers to an IP addresses which were specified previously. So you can just, this is a command line web browser, so you just specify that you want to access the main container, and you can actually see that there is an Apache inside running. I haven't set anything yet, so it's just the default page. So the second or third thing which I really like about when you are running systemd outside the container and inside the container are the logs. Because I don't know who is using Docker here, and how do you do logging? What? With logly, huh? I don't know that. But interesting, but you can do that because now we have Journal D remote, which will send the logs to a different by HTTP, yes, but you can also use the next new tool which we have written, and you can send those logs in syslog format. So you can have rsyslog running somewhere on your server, and so send those logs directly to that server. So if I want to see logs from my HTTP service from that container, I just specify from the host that I want to see the logs from there and there. And I got this beautiful log file where I specified again when it was, what was the container, what is the service. But even when the log came from systemd, it is somehow related to the HTTPD. Those fails are because I messed up my image in the first, so those were just first few boots. But I think it's a really nice way how to get the information from the container, which you can't do with the regular Docker. So another thing is when I have running container with the newest systemd in it, and it's already running on the background, I can log in into it. I think that Docker has the feature it now also. There is something like Docker login, but I can just root some really secret password. And now I have bash in the container. For example, I can see how long it took to start the container. So the container was started in 100 milliseconds, which is almost nothing. I don't know if I have PS in my, have it. But maybe it would be interesting to call PS. Yeah, so those are just the services which are running inside the container. dget is the thing which is started to allow you to log in into the container. So what I have next, this is also a thing which I really like, and I don't think that Docker allows it. That again, we have some container which is running in the background, and I want to start a new process inside of it. So I just specify that I want to run a command sleep in that container. And now, if I just print the status, I can see that the sleep is really running in that. So next really simple thing, which I don't think it's also not in the Docker, is that you can really easily copy a file to Docker. For example, what I needed was to set up some yum repos inside my container, and I wanted to copy from my host. So just this one command will take it at yum repos d some repo and copy it inside the container in the same directory. of course, you can do this is the thing which Docker can do. You can just bind mount some directory inside the container so it's accessible from the host and from the container. There are just some really easy stuff, like you can enable the container, which means that it will be automatically run during the boot. You can, of course, disable it. And yeah, that's all. There are some links about systemd, our IRC channel, our mailing list, our Git. So, you have any questions?
Since we already mentioned users, does it use user namespaces?
No, it doesn't, because we think that our current implementation of user namespacing is not complete. For example, yes, you can map some set of users to a different set, but for example, then the bind mounts to the container will be broken because you have different UIDs inside the container and outside, so they can't share the files. So what we think is there one thing missing, and it will be some virtual file system probably implemented in kernel, which will also translate those UIDs. So the processes will run in separate namespace, they will have separate UIDs, but the files which they will store will translate again back to the system UIDs. So we think that this is one thing missing, and even this will not work also with Docker. So.
Yeah, but currently, can you just take the Docker image and run it using your machinectl?
Well, as I mentioned, if it's running the init process, you can just call the machine control start and it will run it. If it doesn't if it uses some different command, you have to probably run it through the systemd nspawn, but yes, you can run any image Docker is shipping.
And networking? You didn't show anything about networking. How do you export ports or something?
Well, network the outside the container does I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah, basically NAT. So it will translate the addresses. So you can set that this service has this port in container, and outside it's mapped to that port on that IP addresses. So yeah, you can do that.
And how do you create the images actually? You showed some machine pool, but where did it pull it from?
Well, it pulled from Docker repository.
Okay, so it by default behaves the same like Docker. It just takes the Docker hub.
We have a couple of different commands. This one was machine control pool Docker, which pulls images from the Docker repository. Then we have some pool tar, which pulls images in tar format and install that, and some raw that you can also download. Really, for example, Btrfs image. So we are supporting a lot of, and there is also plan for Rocket images in the future.